He carried her out of the desert like a father carries a child, not knowing she'd repay his mercy with a bullet through the ribs and his name on her lips like a curse. The sun didn't rise that morning. It clawed its way up, white-hot and mean, scraping the sky raw. Elias Cade had seen droughts that cracked the earth like old china, seen cattle drop in their tracks with tongues swollen and eyes glazed, but he'd never seen a woman half buried in a dry creek bed, fingers curled like dead roots around nothing, lips split and whispering to ghosts. He'd ridden out before dawn to check the north pasture. Fence lines sagging, coyotes getting bold, but the dust stormed 2 nights back had shifted the land, erased the trail, left him squinting at a world gone beige and breathless. That's when he saw her. Not a shape, not a body, just a shadow that didn't belong, slumped against a sun-bleached cottonwood, hair matted with sand, dress torn to rags, one bare foot swollen and purple where the boot had been lost. He dismounted slowly, hand near his colt, but not drawing. Not yet. The West taught you that stillness was safer than speed. He crouched beside her, shaded her face with his hat, pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse, thin as thread, stubborn as wire. Alive. Barely. He didn't ask her name, didn't shake her awake. Just uncorked his canteen, poured water slowly between her cracked lips, watched her throat flutter like a trapped bird. She didn't open her eyes, didn't thank him, just swallowed once, twice, then went still again. He wrapped her in his wool coat, the one his sister stitched for him before the fever took her, and lifted her like she weighed no more than a sack of feed. She smelled like sweat and iron and something older, fear, maybe baked into the skin. The horse didn't like the extra weight, shifted under them, and snorted dust into the air. Elias clicked his tongue, gentle, and turned for home. 3 miles back, the ranch sprawled low and tired under the heat, clapboard house, sagging barn, corral where 3 hands sat idle, chewing tobacco and watching the horizon like it owed them something. When Elias rode in, with a stranger limp in his arms, they stood, not to help, to stare. Old man Harker spat into the dirt. That one's trouble, Cade. Smell it on her. Elias didn't answer, just carried her past them, past the creaking porch, past the screen door that hadn't shut right since '82, and laid her down on the cot in the back room, the one they used for sick hands or drunk cousins. The cook, Marta, followed him in, silent as a shadow, laid a wet cloth on the woman's forehead, then crossed herself twice. She ain't from here, Marta whispered. Ain't from nowhere good. Elias nodded. Didn't argue. I didn't care. He'd seen the way her eyelids fluttered when the water touched her tongue. Not just thirst. Hunger. The kind that eats you from the inside out. He pulled up a chair, sat beside her, and waited. The ranch hands drifted back to their chores, muttering. The sun climbed. Flies buzzed at the window. Sometime near dusk, she opened her eyes. Not startled, not scared, just awake, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Her gaze locked on Elias, not grateful, not confused, assessing, measuring, like a wolf deciding if the man by the fire was prey or threat. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stared until the shadows swallowed the room. Il y a lit à lanterne, sat on the floor. You're safe, he said, voice low, rough from dust and disuse. She didn't blink, didn't nod, just closed her eyes again, and slept. That night, Elias slept in the chair, one hand resting on his thigh, the other as near his gun. Not because he feared her, because the West taught you that kindness was a currency, and some folks paid it back in lead. She ate like a coyote with a trap on its leg, fast, quiet, eyes darting, and every time Elias left bread by her cot, she memorized the shape of his holster like it was a map to her freedom. 17 days passed like dust rolling across dry land, slow, silent, heavy with things unsaid. She didn't speak, not a word, not even when Marta changed the bandages on her feet, not even when the fever broke and sweat soaked the sheets like a summer storm. She drank water, ate broth, then bread, thick slices crusty and warm, slathered with lard Elias stole from the cook's pantry. She ate with her hands, fingers trembling at first, then steadier, hungrier, like a body remembering how to live. Elias watched from the doorway more than once, Not spying, just witnessing. The way her throat moved when she swallowed. The way her eyes scanned the room every time a floorboard creaked. The way she slept with one arm curled under her ribs like she was still holding something precious or protecting something broken. The ranch hands called her Ghost when Elias wasn't around. Said she moved like smoke, no sound, no warning, just their one moment, gone the next. They stopped lingering near the back room, stopped joking loud on the porch. Even old man Harker stopped spitting so close to the house. Something about her stillness unnerved them. Not fear, not exactly. More like the quiet before lightning cracks the sky. Elias didn't care what they called her. He left things by her cot, a wool blanket when the nights turned sharp, a tin cup of coffee, black and bitter, a bar of soap wrapped in burlap. Once a book, Treasure Island, dog-eared and spine cracked, one he'd read 100 times by lantern light. She touched it, didn't open it, just ran her fingers over the cover like she was reading the story in the grain of the leather. Then she set it aside. Elias didn't ask why, didn't push. He knew the desert didn't give back what it took without scars. I knew some silences were heavier than words. By the third week, she started moving, slow at first, limping to the porch at dawn, leaning against the post like she was testing the air. Then farther, to the well, to the corral, to the edge of the field where the sunflowers still fought to bloom. She watched the hands mend fences. I watched Elias break a new colt, patient, firm, voice low and steady. Watched the way he tipped his hat to Marta, the way he wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his glove, the way his hand rested on his gun when strangers rode up. She didn't flinch at the gun, didn't look away, just studied it. The leather holster worn soft at the mouth, the way the hammer caught the light, the faint scratch near the trigger guard, like she was memorizing its shape, its weight, its purpose. One night, Elias found her by the campfire behind the barn, not sleeping, not staring, just sitting, knees drawn up, eyes fixed on the flames. He didn't speak, just sat beside her, far enough not to crowd, close enough to share the heat. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a tin cup, handed it to her. She took it, didn't drink, just held it, warmth seeping into her palms. Then, so quiet he almost missed it, she whispered, "Thank you. Not for the whiskey, not for the fire, for everything." Elias nodded. Didn't say you're welcome. Didn't say anything at all. Because in the West, some debts can't be repaid with words. And some mercies plant seeds that grow thorns. That night, she didn't go back to the cot. Slept by the fire instead, wrapped in a spare coat, one hand tucked under her cheek. Elias stayed awake until the coals turned gray. I watched her breathe, wondered what ghosts rode beside her in the dark, wondered if he'd done the right thing, wondered if kindness was just another kind of rope, and he'd tied the knot himself. They didn't read any warrant, just pointed at her like she was a wolf in sheepskin, and Elias stood between them like a man who didn't know mercy could get you killed. Dawn came quiet that day. No rooster crow, no wind in the cottonwoods, just a heavy hush like the land was holding its breath. Elias was mending his saddle girth. When the hoofbeats started, slow, deliberate, 3 horses walking in tight formation. He didn't look up right away. Thought it was traders. Thought it was the mail rider. But the rhythm was wrong. Too measured, too grim. When he finally raised his head, he saw them. 3 riders, dust-coated and sun-lean, badges dull as old nails pinned to their chests. Sheriff Tate rode point, broad shoulders, narrow eyes, hat pulled low like he was already mourning something. No smiles, no hellos, just reins pulled tight and silence thick enough to choke on. Elias wiped his hands on his pants, stood slow. "Sheriff." Tate nodded once. Didn't dismount. Didn't speak. Just let his gaze slide past Elias, past the corral, past the barn, past the porch, and settle on her. She was feeding the horses, back turned, bucket in hand, hair tied loose, sleeves rolled to the elbow. She hadn't heard them yet. Or maybe she had, and didn't care. "That her?" Tate asked, voice dry as cracked leather. Elias didn't answer. Didn't move. Just stepped sideways, blocking the line of sight. "Ain't here to cause trouble, Cade," Tate said, but his hand rested on his revolver. "Just here to collect." "Collect what?" Elias asked, voice low, steady. Ain't got no cattle missing. No horses gone. Tate spat into the dirt. She's wanted. Judge Hollis. Silver Creek. You know the one. Elias didn't. Didn't need to. The name carried weight. The kind that bent men's backs and broke women's wills. They say she burned his house down, Tate went on. With him in it. And 2 deputies. And a girl. No more than 12. Elias didn't flinch. Didn't look at her. Just kept his body between the law and the woman who'd slept by his fire. She's done no wrong under my roof, he said. Tate's mouth twitched, not a smile. A warning. Ain't about what she done here, Cade. It's about what she done before. That's when she turned. Slow. Calm. Bucket still in hand. Her eyes met Tate's. No fear. No surprise. Just recognition. Like she'd been waiting for this sunrise, too. Elias didn't turn. Didn't ask her if it was true. Didn't need to. He saw in the way her fingers tightened on the bucket handle. In the way her shoulders squared. Not to fight. To remember. You got proof? Elias asked. Tate didn't answer. Just nodded to his men. One of them tossed a folded paper onto the dirt. Yellowed, stamped, smudged with boot prints. Wanted. Dead or alive. 500. Elias didn't pick it up. Didn't look. Just stood there, boots planted like fence posts, heart hammering like a trapped thing. That night, she vanished. Took his best horse, the black gelding with a white star. Took his rifle, the Winchester he'd carried since '78. Took the silver locket his mother gave him, tucked in his top drawer, next to his spare bullets. Left behind one thing, a single .45 caliber bullet, placed neat on his pillow. Not a threat, a promise. Elias found it at moonrise, cold and gleaming in the lantern light. He picked it up, weighed it in his palm, felt the groove of the casing, the kiss of the primer. He didn't cry, didn't curse, just sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance. Then he stood, packed his saddlebag, filled his canteen, strapped on his gun, not to bring her back, not to turn her in, to understand why the woman he'd saved, the woman he'd fed, sheltered, watched sleep by the fire, had chosen to leave him a bullet instead of a goodbye. The desert doesn't lie, and neither did she. He just hadn't been listening close enough. She wasn't running anymore, just waiting, rifle across her knees, eyes dry as bone, ready to tell him why mercy was the one thing she couldn't afford to let live. Coyote Canyon didn't welcome visitors, it swallowed them. Walls of red sandstone rose like cathedral ribs, carved by wind and time into faces that watched with hollow eyes. The sun here didn't shine. It scorched, painting everything the color of dried blood, turning shadows into knives. Elias found her where the creek used to run, now just cracked mud and bleached stones, sitting cross-legged on a flat rock, back straight, rifle laid across her thighs like a lover's arm. She didn't look up when his horse snorted, didn't flinch when he dismounted, just kept her gaze fixed on the horizon, where the sky bled into the earth like a wound refusing to close. He didn't draw, didn't shout, just walked toward her, boots crunching on gravel, spurs silent, hands open at his sides. 10 paces away, he stopped, close enough to see the dust on her lashes, far enough to give her room to shoot. You left a bullet on my pillow, he said. Voice calm, quiet, like he was talking to a spooked horse. She didn't answer. Not right away. Just ran her thumb along the rifle stock. Slow, familiar, like she was saying goodbye. Then, without looking at him, you should have let me die in that creek bed. Elias didn't argue. Didn't say she was wrong. Just sat down on a rock opposite her, the canyon wind tugging at his coat, the silence between them thick as molasses. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. The sun climbed. A hawk circled overhead, crying once, sharp and lonely. Then she spoke, not fast, not angry, just empty, like a well drained dry. She told him about Judge Hollis, how he wore silk vests and smiled with teeth too white to be honest, how he bought girls from busted homesteads, from desperate fathers, from orphan trains that never stopped, how he kept them in the cellar behind his house, chained to the wall, fed once a day, sold twice a week. She told him about the girl, Lila, 12 years old, freckles like cinnamon, voice soft as a lullaby. How she tried to run, how the judge caught her, how he made an example, She told him how she'd waited 3 months, pretending to be broken, pretending to be grateful, pretending to forget the faces of the ones who vanished in the night. How she'd stolen matches from the kitchen, how she'd waited for the wind to shift, how she'd lit the curtains while the judge slept, drunk on his own power, how the fire spread fast, hungry, righteous, roaring like God's own fury, how she'd unlocked the cellar, how the girls ran, how Lila didn't make it, caught in the smoke, tripped on her chains, burned where she fell. She told him how she'd ridden for 3 days with no water, no food, no name, just rage and regret stitched into her skin. And then she looked at him, really looked, eyes dry, voice steady. "You were kind," she said. "That's why I didn't shoot you sooner." Elias didn't move, didn't reach for his gun, just nodded, slow, heavy, like a man who finally understood the shape of her sorrow. "I'm not here to stop you," he said. "Not here to save you. Just to know." She didn't smile, didn't cry, just lifted the rifle. Not fast, not angry, just inevitable. He didn't beg, didn't run, just knelt like a man at prayer, like a man ready, like a man who knew some debts can't be paid in bread or blankets or silence. The hammer clicked back. The canyon held its breath. And she raised the barrel, not with hate, with sorrow, the kind that only blooms in the desert. Beautiful, brittle, and sharp enough to cut a man's soul clean in half. The shot didn't echo, it wept, rolling through the canyon like a mother's cry, and Elias fell slowly, like a man who'd already made peace with the weight of his own mercy. The bullet didn't scream, it sighed, a soft, final breath of gunpowder and regret that curled through the canyon air like smoke from a dying fire. Elias didn't jerk, didn't gasp, just folded, knees first, then chest, then forehead pressed to the red earth like a man bowing before an altar he'd built himself. Blood bloomed slowly across his shirt, dark, thick, soaking into the dust like rain that came too late. She didn't lower the rifle right away, just held it there, barrel trembling, smoke curling from the muzzle like a ghost trying to speak. Her breath came even, steady, not from calm, from emptiness. The kind that settles after the storm has ripped everything away and left only silence in its place. She stepped forward, one boot, then the other. Knees hit the dirt beside him, not to check his pulse, not to beg forgiveness, just to be near. She pressed her forehead to his, skin to skin, sweat to blood, breath to silence, and whispered something, low, broken, lost to the wind that swept through the canyon like a mourner's hymn. No one heard it. No one ever would. Then she stood, didn't wipe her eyes, didn't look back, just walked. No horse, no rifle, no canteen. Just the sun on her shoulders and the weight of what she'd done pressing down like a yoke. She vanished into the rocks, into the heat, into the myth the West would make of her. 3 days later, they found him, buzzards circling lazy overhead, flies dancing in black clouds above his chest, fingers curled tight around a single dried wildflower, petals brittle as old parchment. Sheriff Tate spat, kicked dust over the bloodstain, and called it justice. The preacher from Silver Creek muttered scripture and called it tragedy. Marta wept into her apron and called it cruel. But the land? The land just sighed, long and low, like it had seen this story before. Some say she crossed into Mexico, traded her dress for a nun's habit, and spent her days handing bread to orphans with eyes just as hollow as hers. Others swear they saw her years later, older, quieter, standing at the edge of a border town cemetery, placing wildflowers on a nameless stone. Either way, Elias Cade's mercy lived longer than his heart. And sometimes, out here, where the dust remembers every footstep and the wind carries every whisper, that's the only redemption the West allows. The ranch stood empty after that. Fence posts rotted, roofs sagged, horses wandered off, and on still nights, when the coyotes fell quiet and the stars hung low, folks claimed you could hear it. Not a ghost, not a cry, just the echo of a single shot, and the sigh of a woman who loved a man enough to kill him, because love in the desert is just another kind of drought, and some souls are too cracked to hold it.